This first piece is from the nonfiction work that I came here to write, called America Underground. This is a section from the introduction, Excavating Toil and Trouble. America, land of the free, home of the brave, the beautiful, a melting pot. In God we trust, e pluribus unum, land of opportunity, of manifest destiny, and a unique brand of dream. States united, tribes divided, a melting pot of culture, color, creed, and opinion. Our namesake, a Vespucci, an Italian. Our anthem set to a tune written by British patriots in a British club, named after Anacreon of ancient Greece. We boast a French Statue of Liberty, an Egyptian pyramid on our Great Seal. Our national flower, the rose, is primarily native to Asia, although most florists today source their bouquets from Colombia. The country, of course, not to be confused with South Carolina's city of Columbia, named in honor of Christopher Columbus, an Italian who never set foot on continental North America. Our homeland, the melting pot. Growing up, I heard so much about the melting pot, a term that has lost considerable favor among sociologists over the past several decades. Cultural critics and scholars have since embraced far fresher metaphors for American multiculturalism: kaleidoscope, mosaic, salad. As a child, I'm not even sure that I understood the immigration-specific root of the term melting pot. My imagination was already off and running with visions of a container big enough to hold everything that stood to connect or disconnect our country's population. The image of this mythic pot assumed a clear shape in my mindscape: massive, heavy, cast iron, matte black, boiling hot in perpetuity. Teachers and talking heads loved to discuss the ingredients, the preparation and presentation. There was so much focus on the vessel. People liked to critique the kettle as if we were all standing outside or above it, doing kitchen prep, so preoccupied with measurements that we simply ignored the contents of our cultural slow cooker, more concerned with stocking tinder and kindling and barrels of oil, lest the fire cool beneath this molten composition, which is American. I longed to look inside the pot. I pictured eras and events stirring the matter until it congealed like pepper jelly, overflowing and spreading across our whole nation in a fat, translucent ribbon, at once hot and sweet, cohesive and complex, our senses too saturated to distinguish heat from sweetness, cohesion from complexity. I assumed that if our geographically defined country was the vessel, then the ground must be soaked through with this mysterious potion. I believed in a powerful secret-keeping place called Subterranea. I dug my sneakers into the yard, prodding for traces of magic. Sometimes I'd fancy myself a prodigious archaeologist. Other times, I was Macbeth's long-lost fourth wayward sister, admiring the double-double toil and trouble filling our landmass. Then the charm is firm and good. Time has proven me to be an underachiever where archaeology and witchcraft are concerned. I still believe in Subterranea, though. Toil, trouble, and all. Our ideas and beliefs do not connect, and that is okay. The disconnection is our pride, a requirement for our collective identity. We treasure the unique, the individual, the nonconformist. It's who we are. It's what we prize. But disconnection alone cannot sustain a united people. So we busy ourselves, sorting the ingredients again, analyzing them, hunting for continuity, ever ignoring our most accessible connective tissue, which isn't an abstract quality or platitude at all. It is tangible and touchable, and it forces us, by the force of gravity, to make contact every single day. It is directly under our feet, even if shoes and socks and sidewalks interpose, because, if nothing else, we share this massive swath of post-Pangea landmass, so varied in its topography and terrain. We share the land, even with its range of dirt, from crumbling buckshot to red clay, to fertile loam, to silt and sand and rocky, rocky soil, From forest to prairie, to parking lot to trail, the acidic and alkaline, the nutrient-rich and toxin-sick, the parts we excavate and the parts we contaminate, the parts we pave over and the parts 6 feet under. We share the land. America, with your big fat green and your blue green and your jewel box cities and your ghost towns and your amber waves and your majestic violet mountains, in your post-industrial towns where scrappers forage for copper, aluminum, tin, steel, iron, and brass in the cadavers of former factories, shipping metals to China to be melted down and repurposed into products that are then shipped back and sold in the USA. America, with your bountiful farms and your chemical-cloaked seeds, with your hidden fuel lines and your incomprehensibly sacred ground, and a shame over the sanctity spoiled in settlement, which is a shame so deep that textbooks avoid acknowledging it at all costs. Developers pour concrete and encourage us to look up because we are so fond of saying onward and upward. We are so fond of height and development and up, up, up. We often forget to look down, which is a pity, because the ground is soaked through with the hot, sweet solution from our overflowing cauldron. Mark Twain wrote of patriotism, "It is a word which always commemorates a robbery. There isn't a foot of land in the world which doesn't represent the ousting and re-ousting of a long line of successive owners who, each in turn as patriots, with proud, swelling hearts, defended it against the next gang of robbers who came to steal it and did, and became swelling-hearted patriots in their turn." End quote. Twain reminds us that the land is neither our creation nor our possession, but an experience on loan until the next robbers arrive. While living on it, we might as well get acquainted. Some of us hunt for access points, mechanisms with which to scratch an inexplicable itch. Beachcombers powering up their metal detectors and children digging holes in their backyards are doing more than hunting for lost coins or shortcuts to Shanghai. They're fraternizing with their foundation. These acts of intimacy are instinctive to our human nature, if not always nurtured by our social nature. To be certain, some American communities do identify directly with the intuitive relationship to the land. Oglala Lakota Chief Luther Standing Bear, Sioux, wrote, "The American Indian is of the soil, whether it be the region of forests, plains, pueblos, or mesas." I hope that in borrowing his words, I offer a fair representation of the American Indian people of whom he speaks. I would not dare speak for them. I can only write as myself, a white woman who grew up in an Illinois town built alongside the Mississippi River, the aorta of our nation's heartland, raised by parents whose thumbs are every shade of green, like the nearby state park swallowing our sunset view. I can write as a non-farming descendant of farmers who still love and care for their Arkansas fields with such devotion and respect that I only hope to have inherited a measure of their reverence for the miracle of growth and harvest. I write as one of the 314 million citizens who live here now, having adopted the ashes and errors and wonders archaeologically prepared for us. We are unable to change the past, even when we tear down and build, cover and clear, even as we pave highways and stack rooms upon rooms inside buildings that scrape the sky, at which we marvel, even as we tally development, gentrification, and abandonment. We cannot change the past, but we can change the way we experience it. It is with an almost gruesome optimism that I look to the land for a unifying substance, the communal quality saturating everything that is our stolen and borrowed and shared America, to develop that sense of connectivity, which I hope is a step toward acknowledging and honoring our connective tissue. Perhaps then, regard for land rights, nature conservation, historical, cultural, and architectural preservation might follow. The term melting pot was invented by a British playwright, Israel Zangwill, for his eponymous play about Russian Jewish immigrants in America. The story ends with an apology and forgiveness of a nearly unforgivable act. It ends with a kiss. It has a happy ending, what we might call a fairy tale ending. And why shouldn't it? Fairy tales suit us perfectly. Globally inspired, fantastic collisions of hot and sweet. It should come as a delight, then, to discover that our physical landmass is a veritable trove of such stories. Below American pavement and astroturf and cornfields and canyons are artifacts and spaces that represent our collective experience, spreading out like a gumbo yaya of witchery and history, immigration, industry, loss, fear, security, greed, secrecy, and solidarity. They are stories every bit as wicked and righteous as any German fairy tale or Greek fable, as adventurous as Hans Christian Andersen's Aventur, as dear and feared as any Russian Skotsky or Chinese Shenmue or Mexican folklore. They are, perhaps, even more powerful because they are true. And what of the story's endings? In this collection, soldiers' bones are still lost. Surreal underground gardens face construction threats. The mine fire in Centralia, Pennsylvania, still burns underground and will continue to burn indefinitely. The Crypt of Civilization, a time capsule not to be opened until the year 8113, may be riddled with mold for all we know. But we do know better than to assign endings to these stories at all. They do not end. They live through us, just as our stories will live on through the ground. Our challenge is to excavate them, welcoming the wicked alongside the glorious, convinced that the only real mistake would be if the living failed to acknowledge, honor, and experience the land's offerings. We could affix shame and trauma to the stories associated with these places, or if the shame and trauma are too much to bear, we could enjoy the comfort of invisibility, ignoring the sights altogether. But understanding that we experience history's effects whether we acknowledge them or not, why not learn the stories? Our foundation invites us to reframe all ground as sacred ground, to develop an intimate connection to our homeland by way of intimate connection to the land itself. Why not accept? There is comfort in context, after all. Yes, it was a Brit who said, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Sir Winston Churchill's sentiment is just what our hot pot needs. Perhaps the land can connect us in near magical ways, even when nothing else does the trick. Look down, dig deep, then the charm is firm and good. And that's the end of that. So this is from a story called So Long, Wild Child of the Driftless. Something is happening up there. Kira crouched down low, put her hands on the ground. She would be perfectly poised to play leapfrog if anyone else was around. No one was. She was alone and anyway not in a game-playing mood. She dropped her head. It wobbled loosely on her neck, chin to chest. Her hair draped her face, piling up in dirty tangles on the ground. She closed her eyes, listened. Something is happening. I can't hear you yet, but something is changing. I feel it. I know. She moved lower still, dropping her knees into the hard earth, sliding her hands forward, stretching her forearms flat to the ground, pressing her left cheek into its cool clay, loosening her jaw, her eyelids, her lips, letting her body go limp. Kira sank into the earth. She allowed her molecules to drop away. She felt them fall onto the ground, felt them seep into the cool mud floor. Somewhere down one of the colony's countless tunnels, a child made the sound a crow makes, a bright and piercing caw, cueing an explosion of giggles and the soft sound of bare feet scampering deeper into the darkness. The screech and the laughter echoed through the cavern. Kira didn't mind. She was already dissolving. Sleep came to her. She welcomed it. Kira let her mind out of its shell, let her mind wiggle out of her body, let it stretch into long, spineless wisps, swimming through the air, exploring the colony's catacombs like so many wiggly worms. They swam toward the surface, past the trees, toward the clearing. She let them. And this time, she willed them to go beyond, to places forbidden, unknown. Something is happening and we need to know what. I will help you, but I need your blessing. I need to cross the clearing. I promise to take care of you, of us. Then she heard it, a heartbeat. Kira's eyes fluttered open. Somewhere, a child made the sound of a crow. Get over here, you gotta hurry. The mud puppies are tearing each other to bits. Elio's words echoed down the corridor and into Kira's head, luring her onto her feet. She stretched, blinked hard, and followed the sound of her 4-year-old brother's voice. At 14, Kira was the oldest child in the colony. She'd been born on the outside and brought to the driftless as a little girl, impure by birth, but raised just as purely as her 8 brothers and sisters, just as purely as all the rest. There were hundreds of them now, wild children of the driftless colony. I'm coming, buddy. Kira quickened her pace toward the sunlit chamber where her brother was dancing to pass the time. Elio hugged her legs in greeting, then took his oldest sister by the hand and pulled her toward the canopy pond. Kira could tell straight away he was wrong. Those aren't mud puppies, E. Those are axolotls. Mud puppies hide way down at the bottom. She could see through the murky water to tell that one of them had already lost an arm. Ruthless little shits. Oh well. It would grow back. They're cousins? Kira smiled, close enough. Sure. Phibians? Amphibians, yes. Hand in hand, she drew her brother close to the pond's muddy edge. See that there? That's its fishy tail. Salamanders lose theirs when they crawl up on dry ground. Axolotls don't crawl. They grow those legs and feet and toes, but stay in the water their whole lives. Because they want to stay out of the rain. Kira smiled. Elio, so delicate, petrified of storms. The one last night had shaken his nerves, something wicked. Kira didn't get it at all. She loved the rain, the way it made the colony smell like growing things, the way it made the roots sing. But she loved her brother too and wouldn't let him feel ashamed. Probably, yes. Elio nodded, pleased to have his assumption confirmed. 3 more sisters who'd heard his call came running to the water's edge, stumbling over each other, Bee, Lainey, and Noni. They wore ribbons tied around their tummies, the long, loose ends dangling behind them. The stained strips of silk fluttered like weightless tails every time the girls ran, transforming them from children into wolves and foxes and bobcats and squirrels. They still believed in things like spontaneous transformation. Kira worked hard to suspend their belief. She considered this part of her job. The youngest ones counted on Kira not just to tie ribbons, but for other important things too. She told them their bedtime stories, coupled with storytime props, posies or clover chains, prairie grass or vials of black soil, mushrooms or moss, the rare piece of ripe fruit. Kira foraged for objects every time she snuck out, bringing back as many as her pockets would hold. Goldenrod, milkweed pods, a black walnut seed sealed up in pale green flesh, a row of blooms dangling from a stalk of Solomon's seal. These were the things that still lit Kira up. Bee was the first to reach the pond's edge, the first to see a tiny lizardish arm floating close to the water's surface, its severed hinge and wide-set fingers. In lieu of commentary, the little girl screamed, as blood-curdling a sound as a 3-year-old could make. The experience delighted her so that Bee giggled and screamed again. Elio, not to be outdone by his little sister, let loose and joined in. His scream was even higher pitched, even more alarming. Bee screamed louder, Elio screamed higher, Lainey and Noni threw their best wolf howls into the mix. Kira covered her ears and waited as her kid siblings ran away, all of them having completely forgotten what sparked their sound making in the first place. Quiet returned to the canopy pond. In the water, the axolotl sat smiling, its dumb eyes lightless, bright feathery gills floating out around its face like a crown of red petals, like ribbons of fire. It rested on a tadpole tail, while somewhere in its cells the miraculous regeneration process began. It would grow a new arm in due time. Pretty impressive trick for a creature known to reject evolution. Shh, someone's coming. Kira heard footsteps and muffled voices coming from the surface. Men whispering, 2 probably, maybe 3. 2, she decided. The shuffles grew closer. They were walking toward the gate trees above her, a cluster of evergreens and willows that masked the colony's watershed gate, so named for its convergence to pools and trout streams and fresh supplies of water. Its web of roots and vines had been coaxed over time to serve as a canopy that ran from the surface down to the pond where Elio liked to watch for mud puppies. Bits of sun and moon snuck through, casting lacy patterns of light on the canopy pond. Kira loved the lace, the way it refused to stay the same. She tiptoed silently, barefoot, along the pond's soft edge, slid her willowy frame through the thick of the vines, fit her shadow to match the canopy's shadow, and hid. She was good at disappearing. It was one of her gifts. The whispers grew closer. Bodies approached the gate, obscuring all underground traces of sun. The lace on the pond disappeared. Kira's eyes closed. She could feel the roots and vines without touching them. She imagined herself melting into them, spiraling inside of them. She lost the sound of her breath. The 2 men lowered themselves down through the watershed gate. The shadows steadied themselves less than a foot from where Kira stood on the other side of the root canopy. If she was breathing, it was inaudible. One man held onto a vine, used it for support. His fingers rested against Kira's hair, knots masquerading as fine wisps of root. Can't believe this is actually it. Seemed like a lifetime, and then here we are. Kira knew this voice. Louis Salm, one of the elders. You've done a fine job, son. The other man slapped Louis on the back and gave him 2 firm pats of approval. Kira knew this voice too. Jimmy Q, one of the Magi, the 3 elders most revered by all colonists. As the community's founders and decision makers, the trio had first come to be known as the 3 wise men. Though not 3 kings, of course, the colony was godless and lawless after all. But it needed wise men to keep order down below. Now in their 60s, soft-bellied and strong-willed, they filled in as fathers and grandfathers for colonists who'd left their own families behind. Louis unwound his fingers from the vine and from Kira's hair and followed Jimmy's empty-handed progression into the colony's halls. They weren't carrying boxes of clothes or supplies. They weren't dragging kill from a hunt. Oh, it's an honor, Lou. Jimmy Q's voice was so smooth and dreamy, charming even, Kira could tell. But the sound of it left a sticky residue in her ears, a mucusy, filth-trapping slime, much like the track of a Pleistocene snail. She ignored her fingernails' urge to scrape the voice out of her ears' cochlea. Instead, she accepted the dangling vine's collective offer to let its canopy serve as a sieve, distilling the eldest Magi's words down to unnuanced phonetics. A breeze blew above the ground, creating a soft, low whistle that floated down through the gate. It broke Kira's focus and obscured Jimmy's words. The men were moving steadily away now, leaving only fragments for Kira's ears. Detonate, over soon. Act of war, act of love. And then it was silent again. Lace made of light returned to the pond's surface. Changed, of course. It always was. Kira unhid herself, unwound herself from her camouflage place. With silent footsteps still, she walked to where the axolotls had been. Nothing now but muddy water. They'd been nearly extinct for decades up there. Down here they still hovered midway between tadpole and newt. Dull eyes, dumb smile. Maybe this is it, Kira thought, sitting down in a strip of light. She loved her home, but something was happening up there, and she was tired of being protected from it. She always assumed they'd need so many more before the time came, so many more children, so many more years, but maybe the time for a fire had come. In their lessons, the children were taught that prairies and forests were sometimes subjected to prescribed burns. Kira knew that to thrive, coast redwood forests caught fire. When big trees grew so very big that they stole sun from all the foliage below, only a fire could save the trees from themselves. Burning brought balance. It fertilized the soil and released millions of tiny spores into the air, transforming the wind from a simple current into an extraordinary promise of new forestscapes. Healthier ones, more vibrant ones. And so it was with men. Soon the greediest would need to be burned to the ground, brought down from the top. The Magi often talked about that. Then there would be room for a healthier world, a more vibrant one, and they could resurface and grow. The elders had planned so carefully so many years ago, and their people, like invisible spores teeming with life's potential, grew stronger in number every year. Her brothers and sisters, by blood and by proxy, were gaining fortitude in their subterranean village, safeguarded from soul-sucking machines and the social ills they caused. She was often reminded how lucky she was to be part of the repopulation, to be chosen to help restore nature's balance above. Even so, thoughts of the broken world kept flooding her brain. She wasn't supposed to remember those things. She sensed that if she ever so much as talked in her sleep about the strange-shaped horizon, the giant boxes and enormous sky needles, she would be regarded as impure at best. So she kept the images to herself, and only the trees and the water and the ground knew her secret. I'd been nearly Bee's age, Kira thought. She wondered if her little sister's mind would save room over time for the image of an armless amphibian, if Bee would remember discovering the sound of her own scream. The night before, Kira had used the last of her storytime objects, an arthritic honey locust pod. Normally, she'd spend this day hunting for more. But today, suspecting there'd be no more stories to tell, she hadn't even bothered to wear clothes with pockets. Today was the day Kira promised herself she'd be bold enough to cross the clearing if the earth gave its blessing. She was holding out for certainty, clarity. She needed a stronger sign. So Kira stretched her body flat against the earth again and loosened all of her parts to initiate fusion. She licked the bit of dirt on her lip, let the taste connect her to it. Then Kira peeled back the skin on her heart and opened the space between her ears and throat and asked the ground again if she was free to cross the clearing. And that's what I have prepared for you. I'm so grateful to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming. And I can't begin to express my gratitude for this experience here. It has been transformative on every level. I have excavated parts of my brain that I didn't think I could get to those depths. And I really look forward to hopefully being able to share the extent of it with you soon. 2 pretty complete manuscripts. Ready to start polishing on to the next phase. Thank you so much for your time.